Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Do I Have Time for This? The series that looks at old and new video games from indie to AAA and everything in between to help you figure out if you've got the time to play, finish, 100% complete a game, or to just leave it in your backlog to forever gather dust. Today we are looking at a game with a really mundane name, but a really fun premise, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Developed by Machine Games, the team that brought us the fantastic reboot of the Wolfenstein games and the not-so-great spin-off Wolfenstein Youngblood, this new game is honestly a breath of fresh air amidst the current first-person offerings on the market. Published by Bethesda, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle takes a well-known IP, throws some fun gameplay elements into the mix, and sets us off on a globe-trotting quest to track down the titular Great Circle before a German faction gets their hands on it.
Yeah, about your pamphlet, I'm not seeing anything about German history between 1939 and 1945. There's just a big gap. Everyone was on vacation!
So before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe, as we jump into catacombs, ruins, and pits of snakes with a very authentic, straight-up fun video game.
Some of these inscriptions look more like vandalism.
Definitely ecclesiastical. I'm sure gonna try.
After a light touch intro tutorial to set up the character and the plot, we are thrust straight into a mystery and told to just get on with it. I was actually quite shocked when, following the linear start of the game, we are dropped into a big sandbox of a level and given a map. Typically in these games you're on a set path following set objectives, and you don't often get to stop and smell the roses. While here in the Great Circle, the pace slows right down and gives you a whole host of options. Do you follow the main quest, explore the open area, do some photography, or even do some side quests? These areas aren't massive by any means and have a small and slightly pointless fast travel system, but almost every path you have has a shortcut to another path, making a fully realized and interconnected play space. The side quests are also often worth doing, as rather than being a fetch quest or beat an enemy type affair, each side quest actually gives you some context to the story, be it character motivations, interactions with the main characters, or a significant gameplay upgrade. This is such a great way to encourage people to actually do the side quests in a game like this, and I'm all for it. Another part of these side quests and explorable spaces is the skill points you get for doing them. Taking photos and completing missions will net you skill points, which, if you have the corresponding skill books, allow you to purchase upgrades for Dr. Jones throughout the game. The list of things you can upgrade is actually surprisingly big, and helps you in almost every aspect of gameplay. The only downside to some of these skill books is not only do you have to buy them, but you need to spend skill points on them as well, which sometimes feels like double dipping, but it isn't the case on every skill book. Now we've talked about the play space, let's discuss the three pillars of the gameplay itself, the fighting, puzzles, and the stealth. Combat is a hugely mixed bag in my opinion, so let's start with the good stuff. The melee combat is incredibly fun here. The punch you have does the telltale cinematic snap just like it does in the movies. When you block for a counter, using a follow-up attack is contextual, so if you block a right-hand attack and then attack with your left, you'll shove them back, but if you attack with your right, you'll actually punch them because that hand is free. It's a small attention to details like this that really makes the difference to first-person melee combat, although I do feel like Indy kind of punches as fast as an anime character. Melee weapons are equally as fun. You can grab practically anything to use as a melee weapon, from a broom to a fly swatter to an umbrella. These things do have durability, so you have to swap on the fly when they break, but for the most part you're using them for stealth takedowns and the occasional moment where everything goes to hell. You can repair certain melee weapons using repair kits, but these are ones that come with costumes, which I'll talk about later. You also have the classic Indiana Jones staple, the whip. This can be used for traversal, swinging and climbing, but can also be used in a variety of ways in combat too, disarming or stunning enemies, keeping dogs from biting through your wrists, or even as a stealth weapon for knocking enemies out cold. Where the combat falls apart for me is with the guns. Shooting in this game does feel good if you're using Indy's revolver, but anything else just feels like a total pea shooter. With the way the AI works as well, when enemies come to attack you, they just run in a straight line, so you can pretty much just stand still and shoot each person as they walk towards you. There's not really any flanking or anything, so it just becomes a bit of a parody of itself, which is a huge shame. There had to be guns in this, and I don't envy machine games having to work both options in without making the guns seem massively overpowered, but here we are. The last thing to note was the lack of enemy variety. I'm not entirely sure what you could do in the canon Indiana Jones universe, but given how diverse things were in Wolfenstein, you would think there would be a bit more. You get melee enemies, bigger melee enemies, and a variety of those two but with guns, and that's it. I feel like you could have had some sort of shield or armoured enemies, something which made you use the whip more maybe. I'm not sure what we could have had, but it definitely needed more. Hey, at least the dogs weren't as big a threat as they could have been.
Or what? You'll release the dogs or the bees, or the dogs with bees in their mouth, and when they bark they shoot bees at you? Well, go ahead.
In terms of the secrets and puzzles, I actually really enjoyed them in this game. They felt like a Resident Evil puzzle, only confined to a single room, where you'd find a few notes and then some kind of lock, and you'd have to figure out using some form of codebreaker what the combination would be. It's a shame there was a bit of an over-reliance on this format, and I feel like the main puzzles were made way more accessible by comparison, but all in all, they scratch my lizard brain just right. Next, let's tackle another hit-and-miss gameplay feature, the stealth. I don't really feel like I have to describe this to you, you already know what this stealth is. You sneak around, grab an item, make a distraction, then take the enemy down in one hit. On the whole, their vision is horrendously bad, as if they all have cataracts or something.
Wait! You gotta use these drops. They prevent your eyes from crusting over.
Oh, here we go with the add-ons. No thanks.
Not only this, but they have very selective hearing, so you can smash someone's head in a meter behind them, shattering a chair, and they don't even flinch. What is interesting though, is what comes about before and after this sequence. You may have heard some comparisons on the grapevine to Hitman with this game, and people saying this are not entirely wrong. You can move bodies and hide them once you've knocked them out, but there's actually some light social stealth involved in this game too. Over the course of your time in these open sections, you'll find costumes. These costumes can be given to you or hidden off the beaten path for you to find. They come with repairable melee weapons and sometimes guns, and allow you access to certain areas without raising suspicion from the guards, and NPCs will treat you differently depending on what costume you're wearing. This does wreck the immersion in some spots, as everyone's fine with a priest ziplining around the Vatican, and the harder to find outfits can sometimes completely trivialize navigating enemy bases, but they did need to reward you for it somehow. Being a massive fan of the Hitman games, I absolutely love this social stealth inclusion. They even have a commander type enemy who sees through your disguise no matter what. Such a great addition to the game. The last thing worth mentioning gameplay wise are the health buffs you get from fruit and pastries. Eating fruit grants a stamina boost and pastries offer a health boost. It's not really anything groundbreaking, but I just find the fact that Indiana Jones is sneaking into fascist bases and stealing all the croissants hilarious.
Are you going to finish that croissant?
So how is the actual story here? Well, I think the story is actually pretty solid. It genuinely feels like one of the early trilogy movies, and the game is actually set between them. While some steps and tropes are seemingly repeated, you can't argue that this story doesn't make you feel like you're watching one of the old Harrison Ford movies. Indiana as a character is actually more complex than you'd think, constantly referencing his old relationship from the previous movies and how he's forever stuck in the past. Even the new love interest has significantly more to do and say than to simply just be another damsel in distress, screaming at every snake or spider they see. Troy Baker also does a great impersonation of a young Harrison Ford for the voice acting, and the way he's written, it's exactly what you'd expect from the titular hero. You bounce from exotic location to exotic location, quip your way through dialogue with the big bad, and slap more faces than Will Smith at the Oscars.
Oh, wow! Wow!
Seriously though, the set pieces here are insane. With one in the snow being spoiled during the marketing of the game, you'd think that was one of the biggest, but there's actually some here that can rival the likes of the Uncharted series. The only downside to the story for me was that the ending reveal of what the Great Circle actually is felt a bit out of nowhere, but the exposition dump that came along with it gave me enough info to just accept what they were saying. I also felt like the ending could have done with a bit more interaction, rather than just being very cutscene heavy, as a lot of the larger set pieces in the game actually have you performing the actions, rather than making you just watch it. So let's get down to it. How long does this game take? In my first playthrough doing all of the main missions, side missions, and gathering I'd say at least 90% of the collectibles, I came out at 30 hours or so. If you're looking to mainline the story, skipping all the upgrades and extra missions, it'll be around 15 hours. However, if you're a die-hard archaeologist who doesn't believe Indiana Jones belongs in a museum and want to hit that 100%, you're looking at 35 hours. I was surprised at just how much content Machine Games managed to cram into a licensed video game here. You get multiple detailed puzzles, tons of collectibles, little interactions, and an immersive world all for the price of Game Pass. Honestly, this is exactly the sort of offering Game Pass needed, and I'm glad to see it here. In terms of respecting your time, there isn't a manual save, but there's an extremely generous autosave. Cutscenes can be paused, and as I said earlier, there is a fast travel option in these small sandboxes to make everything significantly faster. Whether you've got a couple hours to spare or you've got the whole day, this game offers plenty and will be a fun time regardless of how long you have to play. There's also the option to revisit old areas throughout the game or once you've completed the main story, so you can clean up any of those pesky collectibles and achievements you missed throughout the first playthrough. I fully recommend Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. For the price of a Subway sandwich, there's a huge amount of fun to be had here. Whether you're after a world-spanning adventure with satisfying melee combat, or you have the nostalgia for the old movies with quippy characters and satisfying punching sound effects like me, this feels like a true entry in the franchise, rather than whatever the Dial of Destiny was meant to be. Yes, the shooting of most guns is kinda bad, which is surprising for the creators of the Wolfenstein reboot series, and the enemy AI is lame, but gameplay-wise I'd say this is everything you need in a lengthy single-player game. I was never bored from beginning to end, and wanted to explore the open sandboxes for more things to do. Maybe it's the stealth enthusiast in me yearning for more games like Hitman, maybe it's the fact my dad made me watch these films at a young age clouding my judgment, but it's just straight up, unfiltered fun. My one true negative, and I'll have tried to hide it as best as I can in the footage here, is the performance. This game struggled on my PC. I'm working on upgrading it in the next few months, but my days does this game have some beefy requirements, and it made recording watchable footage a nightmare. I'm sure you'd be fine on console, but a buyer beware for those of you with older PCs. You may struggle to run this game. For how great it looks graphically and how much stuff is going on at once, it's hard to argue it doesn't need the higher bar of entry, but be prepared as this game will be taxing on your machine. Do you have time for Indiana Jones and the Great Circle? On this channel I like to give my thoughts on the game, alongside a bit more of a deep dive on the time you have to invest, so you know what you're getting into, because time is precious, right? If you enjoyed the video or found it useful, feel free to like and share. If you subscribe, I'm looking to put out regular content like this, alongside some more in-depth video essays and freeform videos, so stick around, and if you have any requests on future videos, just drop them in the comments. And finally, if you want to come chat with me, you can find me over on x.com/gracious_rhino. I'm Gracious Rhino, look after each other, and I'll catch you soon.